Zoc on the seat back ahead counted down with mechanical indifference. 3 hours, 47 minutes until the hospital bed in Phoenix, where his mother lay dying. Grace Bennett, 78 years old, had raised him alone after Korea took his father. 19 years of double shifts at Denny's. Sold her house to keep him from complete financial ruin during bankruptcy. Now spending her final hours in a single-wide trailer because her son couldn't afford anything better. Beside him, Sophie hunched into herself, earbuds jammed deep, 16 years old and already expert at physical proximity combined with emotional distance. Her Target employee shirt showed beneath the hoodie name tag hastily shoved into a pocket when she'd realized he'd noticed. They'd split a protein bar for breakfast. 1 protein bar. Between them. That was the mathematics of their life now. His hand moved unconsciously to the chain around his neck fingers, finding the worn gold band hidden beneath his shirt. 12 years since he'd taken it off his finger. 12 years carrying Jennifer's ring against his chest like penance or prayer or both. The metal was warm from his body heat, smooth from constant touching. Sophie felt his gaze and hunched deeper into her phone. The distance between them measured exactly 12 inches of airline seat, but might as well have been the Grand Canyon. She'd been 4 when Jennifer died. Old enough to remember fragments her mother's voice, the hospital smell her father's face when he stopped being a father and became a ghost. Old enough to carry the loss, but not old enough to understand it. Old enough to be angry about it now, even if she tried to hide that anger behind teenage indifference. Marcus closed his eyes. $187 in his bank account. Middle-aged and broke. 2 plane tickets purchased with maxed-out credit cards that would probably be declined for anything else. This was rock bottom when you were a single father in America, cramped airline seats, shared protein bars, racing against time to say goodbye to the only person who'd never stopped believing you were worth something. 4 rows ahead, the curtain separating economy from first class might as well have been a national border. Beyond that fabric barrier existed a different world: leather seats, actual glassware passengers who didn't choose between eating and eviction. Marcus had glimpsed that world plenty while cleaning the Hancock Tower at midnight, emptying trash for people who earned more weekly than he made monthly. Anonymous labor for forgotten men. The flight attendant's voice crackled through the intercom about cruising altitude and beverage service. Sophie didn't pull out her earbuds. Marcus didn't bother listening past the first words. They'd already eaten. They had nothing to drink. Just 2 more bodies being transported from point A to point B, trying to arrive before death did. Beyond that curtain in seat 2A, Elena Ashford scrolled through medical technology specifications on her tablet, barely noticing the flight attendant refilling her sparkling water. 48 years old, elegant even at cruising altitude tailored blazer, probably worth more than Marcus's entire month of wages. She'd built Ashford Medical Technologies from maxed out credit card and dorm room idea into a company about to IPO at $3 billion. 19 days until the NASDAQ opening bell. 19 days until she became one of the wealthiest self-made women in America. Nobody to share it with except employees, board members, and her brother Damien, whose latest email sat unopened because she knew exactly what it contained: another passive-aggressive critique dressed as fraternal concern. She reached for trail mix beside her tablet, popping a cashew into her mouth without looking. Perfectly roasted, lightly salted, exactly how she preferred. She chewed mechanically, already reaching for another as her eyes tracked revenue projections. Her throat tightened. The cashew wasn't going down. She swallowed harder. Nothing. Her windpipe began to constrict biological alarm, screaming that something had gone catastrophically wrong. The next breath didn't come. Neither did the one after. Her hand flew to her throat, fingers clawing at skin as if she could reach through flesh and open the airway manually. The tablet slipped from her lap, clattering to the floor. Her face began to swell lips, turning colors that shouldn't exist on living tissue. 48 years of building empires, and it was ending because of a cashew. Because anaphylaxis didn't care about quarterly earnings or IPO valuations. The passenger beside her noticed first backing away with instinctive revulsion people have for witnessing death. Someone screamed. The flight attendant rushed over professional composure, cracking into visible panic. 47 passengers watched. 17 pulled out phones to film. Nobody moved to help. They just stared suspended in that peculiar modern paralysis where documentation supersedes intervention. Marcus was on his feet before his conscious mind registered the decision. 15 years in ICU had burned pathways into his nervous system that bypassed rational thought entirely. His body knew what to do, even when his brain was still catching up. He pushed through the curtain, separating economy from first class past the boundary people like him weren't supposed to cross. Sophie's earbuds came out as she watched her father disappear into first class. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. The daughter who'd spent 12 years watching her father shrink into nothing, suddenly seeing him move with purpose again. Marcus dropped to his knees beside the dying woman. His hands calloused from janitorial work, cracked from industrial cleaning chemicals, found her carotid pulse with practiced precision. Weak, thready, fading. He tilted her head back, opening the airway as much as her swelling tissues would allow. His voice came out steady, carrying absolute certainty of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Medical emergency. Anaphylactic shock. Need epinephrine. Need it now. 3 minutes, maybe less. The flight attendant sprinted down the aisle. Elena's terrified eyes locked onto Marcus's face, seeing salvation, seeing competence, seeing someone who knew what death looked like and how to fight it. The passenger filming from seat 3C asked if she was going to die, phone still recording. Marcus didn't bother looking at him when he suggested in terms that left no room for negotiation that the phone should be put away immediately. The phone lowered. The flight attendant returned with the emergency kit. Marcus opened it with movements so smooth they looked choreographed. Epinephrine auto-injector date, checked safety removed, positioned against the lateral thigh. His fingers counted off the compression time in his head, 10,001, 10,002, all the way to 10. The needle deployed. The drug entered her system. Chemistry began its work. Color returned gradually to Elena's face, starting at her extremities and working inward like watching a photograph develop. Her chest rose as air finally found its way through swelling tissues. She gasped, coughed, breathed. The most beautiful thing Marcus had heard in 12 years. Someone applauded. More people joined. 47 passengers celebrating they hadn't just witnessed death at 30,000 feet. Marcus was already checking the clock. 3 minutes and 42 seconds lost. He gave rapid instructions to the flight attendant monitor for secondary reaction second dose if symptoms return. Paramedics at gate-specific hospitals in Phoenix with better allergy protocols. His voice carried authority of someone who'd made these calls under pressure so many times they'd become muscle memory. Then he stood all ready, moving back toward the curtain, back toward economy, back toward his seat, where Sophie waited. The flight attendant called after him, asking for his name, saying the airline would want to recognize what he'd done. Marcus was already through the curtain. He had 3 hours and 37 minutes to reach his mother. He'd already lost 10 minutes he couldn't afford to spare. Elena tried to turn her head, searching for him through the crowd of concerned faces, but all she caught was the back of a worn jacket, with a tear at the shoulder, disappearing into economy class. Then he was gone, vanished like smoke, leaving her alive, but with no way to find the man who'd saved her life. Marcus slid back into seat 38C. Sophie stared at him, really stared maybe for the first time in months. Her voice came out quiet, grudging respect, fighting against years of accumulated resentment. That was impressive. Marcus shrugged, pure economy of motion. Just did what needed doing. Standard protocol. Anyone with ICU training would have done the same. But they both knew that wasn't true. 47 people had watched and only one had moved. Sophie's next question came softer. The woman was going to be okay, right? Marcus confirmed it with the same steady certainty he'd used to calm Elena. She'd make it. Modern medicine and emergency protocols, when executed correctly, and immediately had ways of keeping people alive who should have died. Jennifer flashed through his mind, unbidden. 12 years ago. Different hospital. Jennifer on the delivery table, hemorrhaging in ways that shouldn't be possible, blood pressure dropping while insurance companies deliberated, and Marcus stood there with 15 years of ICU experience rendered completely useless because he was the husband, not the doctor. 52 minutes they waited for authorization. 52 minutes while his wife bled out and someone in an office somewhere decided that saving her life needed to clear more bureaucratic hurdles first. Her last words were whispered plea to take care of their Rosie. Then her hand went limp, and the monitors flatlined, and the world ended while Marcus screamed her name, and Sophie cried in the corner, 4 years old, and watching her mother die because someone had decided money mattered more than lives. Marcus blinked. The memory receded the way it always did, never truly gone, just waiting in the wings for the next trigger. Sophie studied him with eyes that saw too much, understood too much, carried too much for 16. She spoke softer this time. She missed Jennifer too. Past tense, as if missing ever ended. Marcus looked at his daughter properly for the first time that day. 16 now, but she'd been 4 when she lost her mother. Old enough to remember fragments, but not the full picture. Old enough to carry the grief without understanding it. Old enough now to watch her father give up his entire career because he couldn't function in hospitals anymore. She'd carried that weight alone, while he'd been busy drowning in his own. He told her he knew voice rough, with underuse and emotion he refused to fully acknowledge. Sophie studied him for a long moment, teenage armor cracking just enough to let something genuine through. She'd forgotten he used to do that. Save people. It sounded almost like an accusation, or maybe a question she didn't know how to properly ask. Marcus turned to the window, watching clouds scroll past below. So had he. Forgotten, or tried to forget, or wished he could forget. Sophie asked why he'd stopped. The question hung in the stale airplane air between them. Marcus didn't answer. His fingers found the wedding ring on the chain again, gripping it like anchor or lifeline or both. Some questions didn't have answers you could speak out loud on an airplane with strangers all around, and 3 hours still to go before reaching a deathbed. The clock kept counting down. 3 hours, 31 minutes. Somewhere in Phoenix, Grace Bennett was dying, and her son was racing against time to keep a promise he'd made before he knew how hard it would be to keep. 4 hours later, Phoenix Banner Memorial loomed against the desert sky, smaller and more run-down than Northwestern, where Marcus used to work. County facility with outdated equipment and overworked staff. The kind of place where people went when they couldn't afford better options. Grace's room was cramped, the bed too large for her diminished frame. Cancer had taken everything weight, color, strength. But her eyes remained sharp when Marcus and Sophie entered, sharp enough to catalog the exhaustion on her son's face, the defiance on her granddaughter's, the shared grief that connected them. Grace's voice came out weak, but still carried that particular tone mothers used when they were about to tell you truths you didn't want to hear. They'd made it. Marcus looked like hell. Sophie's laugh broke through tears because apparently looking like hell was worth mentioning. Grace asked her granddaughter to get coffee down the hall, giving them a moment. When Sophie left, Grace studied her son with eyes that had watched him for 5 decades. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. When had he last slept properly, eaten real food instead of vending machine garbage? Marcus deflected with practiced ease. He was managing. Grace dismantled the word with one look. Managing wasn't living. She let that sink in before continuing. He had maybe 30 more years if he was lucky. Was he planning to spend them hiding? Marcus tried to protest, but she rolled over him with maternal authority. 12 years of hiding. 3 jobs that barely kept them afloat. Pretending survival was acceptable. It wasn't. Sophie needed more. He needed more. Grace gathered strength from somewhere deep, pushing through pain to deliver what sounded like a prepared speech. She told him about his father. Korea had sent back a different man than the one who'd left. Wouldn't talk about what he'd seen. Worked himself into the ground trying to outrun memories. Took 5 years to find his way back to something resembling peace. But he'd done it because he had reason to family purpose something worth fighting through the darkness for. Marcus felt his throat tighten. His mother's grip on his hand was surprisingly strong for someone so frail. Sophie needed him whole, not just present. There was a distinction. Jennifer was gone. His career was gone. But he was still here, still breathing, still capable of being something other than a ghost in a janitor's uniform. The protest came out rough. He didn't know how to fight anymore. Didn't have the equipment or ammunition or energy. Grace had expected this response. She looked him directly in the eyes and delivered the words that would echo through everything that came after, "You're a Bennett. We don't quit." Simple, direct, non-negotiable. Marcus tried to explain the mathematics of impossibility. $187. Eviction notice in 5 days. Couldn't even afford. The sentence died before completion, because how did you tell your dying mother you couldn't afford her funeral? Grace finished the thought for him, asking the question directly. Marcus looked away. She told him she didn't care about being buried. Burn her, scatter her, throw her in a dumpster, she'd be dead and past caring. But her voice cracked on the next part. She needed him to promise something. Promise to not be afraid of living again. Real living, not just survival. Promise to let himself be seen again after 12 years of practiced invisibility. Marcus wanted to argue he wasn't afraid, but the lie died before reaching his lips. They both knew the truth. 12 years of hiding, because if you never tried, you could never fail. If you never let anyone in, you could never lose them. She pressed harder. Jennifer wouldn't want this half-life. Wouldn't want Sophie growing up thinking poverty and resignation were acceptable endgames. Wouldn't want Marcus working himself into an early grave for minimum wage when he possessed skills that could save lives. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest. He'd tried to save Jennifer. He'd failed. Grace's voice gentled but didn't relent. He'd been Jennifer's husband, not her doctor. He'd loved her. That was all he could have done in that moment. Love wasn't always enough to prevent loss, but it was never wasted. The words hung in the air, simple and devastating. Marcus's eyes burned, but he held everything in because carrying pain standing upright was what you learned by middle age. Sophie returned with coffee nobody wanted. The three of them sat together as the monitors beeped slower. Grace asked Sophie to come closer, needed to look at her granddaughter properly. She told Sophie that Jennifer was watching over her, that both grandparents were proud that grief didn't mean abandonment. Sophie cried openly, 16 and past the age where hiding tears felt necessary. Grace's voice dropped to barely audible. She told Sophie something she'd told Marcus in private, that he was the best son a mother could have. Sophie tried to protest, saying Grace could tell him again later when she felt better. Grace's sad smile said, "They all knew better than that." She asked Sophie to help Marcus remember something important. How to laugh again. Real laughter, not the polite kind. The breathing slowed. Grace's grip on their hands weakened, but didn't release entirely. One more breath. Another. Then nothing. The monitor's flatline cut through the quiet room with electronic certainty. Sophie gasped. Marcus sat frozen jaw, working against words that wouldn't come, eyes burning with tears that wouldn't fall. Some pain you carried standing up shoulders back because collapsing wasn't an option when your daughter needed an example of how to survive loss. He pulled Sophie against his chest and let her sob while his hand stroked her hair the way he used to when she was small. His own grief stayed locked behind his teeth. Voice rough as gravel, he spoke partly to Sophie, partly to the empty room, partly to the ghost of the woman who just left. He'd keep his promise. He didn't know how yet, but he'd keep it. Grace Bennett didn't raise quitters. 3 days later, Desert Memorial Cemetery shimmered under Phoenix sun. Small service. Marcus, Sophie, 3 neighbors from the trailer park, and a priest reading generic platitudes about souls and eternal rest. The casket was far nicer than Marcus could afford. Simple but dignified fresh flowers, arranged beautifully marble headstone with Grace's name carved clean and professional. The funeral home had said it was taken care of when he'd called, which made no sense until he saw the man approaching from the parking lot. Ray Sullivan moved with a slight limp of old military injuries, gray crew cut, and Marine Corps tattoo visible on his forearm. 68 years compressed into weathered skin that had seen combat and come back changed. His flannel shirt and work boots marked him as working class. His bearing marked him as someone who'd commanded respect through competence rather than rank. He stopped at a respectful distance from the grave, nodding acknowledgement to Grace's headstone before addressing Marcus directly. His voice came out gravelly, aged by decades of unfiltered cigarettes and desert air. He introduced himself as Ray Sullivan, mentioned crossing paths with Grace at trailer park potlucks a few times. She'd made excellent casserole. Marcus tried to place the name or face and came up empty. Ray explained that Grace had kept mostly to herself, but they'd talked occasionally about sons who came back from war, different about losses that never healed, clean about carrying weight others couldn't see. The implication settled heavily. Ray had paid for this funeral. When he'd heard Grace had passed, Ray had made calls, called in a favor from the funeral home. Figured Grace Bennett shouldn't go into the ground on county charity, not after how she'd lived. Marcus stared, trying to process someone being generous without obvious angle or expectation. His voice came out defensive because accepting help felt like admitting failure. He couldn't accept this. Ray waved it off. Already done. She'd brought him soup last winter when pneumonia nearly killed him. wouldn't take no for an answer, showing up every day with hot meals and stern instructions about medication schedules. That was the kind of woman who deserved proper goodbye. If Marcus wanted to repay it, he should pay it forward, help someone else when they needed it. Ray extended his hand. The grip was firm, calloused working man's handshake. He mentioned knowing about Marcus from Grace ICU nurse, 15 years lost, wife walked away from career. Marcus stiffened. Grace had talked about all of that with a near stranger. Ray caught the resistance. She'd mostly worried. Said her son was a good man, who'd forgotten how good he was. The observation landed hard. Ray continued saying he recognized that particular brand of forgetting. He'd spent 10 years after Vietnam forgetting himself, forgetting what purpose felt like forgetting, that survival and living were different things. Marcus asked what changed. Ray's answer was blunt. Got tired of being half dead. Figured if he'd survived Vietnam and 30 years of nightmares, he could survive trying to actually live again. He pulled a card from his pocket, cheap cardstock printed at Kinko's, probably basic information and a phrase that felt like challenge. Ray Doc Sullivan, veteran peer support, Vietnam-era medic. Below that, you're not alone in the fight. Ray explained he ran support group veterans, mostly guys who'd left healthcare because the weight got too heavy. Thursday nights, VFW Hall on McDowell. Marcus handled the card carefully, reading it twice. He wasn't a veteran. The distinction felt important. Ray dismissed it immediately. 15 years in ICU counted as combat duty in his assessment. Seeing people die screaming, holding pressure on wounds that wouldn't stop bleeding, making life or death decisions in seconds, while most people got hours to think. That was combat medicine, just different uniform. He paused, studying Marcus with eyes that cataloged too much. Grace had mentioned something about a scholarship offer re-entry program, Billionaire woman trying to help. Marcus confirmed it, cautiously surprised his mother had shared that level of detail. Ray nodded slowly. Grace hoped Marcus would take it, but figured pride would interfere. She'd known her son too well. Most mothers did. Sophie had been quiet throughout the exchange, watching this stranger who'd paid for her grandmother's funeral. Ray turned his attention to her, asking if she was the granddaughter. Sophie nodded. Ray told her Grace had shown photographs, bragged that Sophie was smart as hell and didn't take shit from anybody. Those were exact words Grace had used. Sophie's smile broke through grief briefly. Grace had really said that. Ray confirmed no elaboration needed. He told Sophie her grandmother was proud of her, left it at that. Young people didn't need speeches. They needed acknowledgement. Then back to Marcus with advice delivered like orders. Take the scholarship. Don't let pride kill second chances. God knew Ray had wasted enough years making exactly that mistake. Marcus asked what finally made Ray go back. The answer came simple and devastating. Woke up one morning, looked in mirror, didn't recognize the reflection staring back. Figured it was time to find himself again. Ray started to leave, then turned back with one more observation. Marcus had maybe 2-3 good decades left if genetics cooperated. The question was whether he'd spend them being seen or staying hidden. The word hit, like physical impact. Same word Grace had used, hidden. Like they'd coordinated, except Grace was dead, and Ray had apparently absorbed her vocabulary through trailer park proximity. He mentioned the Thursday group again. 7 p.m. Marcus could show or not show his choice, but Ray would be there. So would 5 other guys who knew what walking away and coming back felt like. The invitation hung without pressure, but with clear expectation. Ray turned to leave again, made it 3 steps before speaking over his shoulder. Grace had been good woman. Best way to honor her was keeping that deathbed promise. Don't waste years like Ray had. You're not done until you decide you're done. The advice came from earned wisdom rather than presumption. Ray walked to his Ford pickup, old model, well-maintained, the kind of vehicle that lasted 30 years because its owner understood preventive maintenance. Sophie broke the silence for a simple declaration that she liked him. Marcus agreed. There was something solid about Ray Sullivan, something that felt like bedrock in a world of shifting sand. Sophie asked if Marcus was going Thursday. Maybe. The answer was non-committal, but they both knew what maybe meant. Grace would want him to, Sophie observed. Marcus slipped Ray's card into his pocket beside Elena's business card from the plane. Two different paths to the same destination. Stop hiding, start being useful again. He looked at his mother's grave marble headstone catching afternoon light. The promise he'd made felt both impossible and non-negotiable. 2,000 miles away in Chicago, Elena Ashford sat in her corner office on the 95th floor of Hancock Tower, floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking a city of lights she'd helped build but never really seen. Bloomberg terminal cycling through pre-market futures, phone buzzing with board member messages. She ignored all of it, focused instead on the private investigator's report glowing on her laptop screen. Marcus James Bennett, age 52. Current residence listing an address that screamed poverty. Eviction notice filed 5 days ago. Employment history detailed his fall from grace with bureaucratic precision. Northwestern Memorial ICU from 2001 to 2016. Exemplary performance reviews every single year. Final salary of $84,000 plus benefits. Then unemployment gap. Then bankruptcy proceedings. Then the current trifecta of minimum wage humiliation night custodian at $13.25 an hour, warehouse worker at $16.50 seasonal classification handyman for cash when he could find it. The financial section made her chest tighten. Wife Jennifer, deceased in 2016, postpartum hemorrhage medical bills totaling $892,000. Insurance covered 60%. Out-of-pocket responsibility, $357,000. Bankruptcy filed 2018. Lost home he'd owned 10 years, $180,000 in equity evaporated. 401k liquidated $127,000 before penalties, $89,000 after taxes. Daughter's college fund depleted $23,000 gone. Current bank balance $187. Credit score 490, the kind of number that followed you like criminal record. Elena pulled up salary data on a second screen average ICU nurse with 15 years experience in Chicago. Currently earned $95,000 to $110,000 annually. Marcus had been on track for comfortable retirement at 65. Good pension, Social Security, maybe travel with his daughter during golden years. Instead, he was cleaning offices at $13.25 an hour. No benefits, no retirement, no future. Beyond maybe scraping together next month's rent if nothing went catastrophically wrong. One medical emergency had destroyed the next 30 years of his life. 52 minutes waiting for insurance authorization. 52 minutes that cost him everything: wife, career, financial security, dignity. Elena understood building things. She'd spent 25 years constructing Ashford Medical Technologies from dormitory daydreams into multi-billion-dollar reality. She couldn't imagine watching it all disappear in less than an hour. She checked her watch. 11:47 p.m. Building management had confirmed Marcus Bennett's schedule midnight to 8 a.m. 7 nights weekly. 95th floor custodial services. He'd been cleaning her office every night for 6 months, and she'd never noticed. Never even wondered who emptied the trash cans or vacuumed the floors. He'd been there right in front of her, completely unseen. Elena stood, walked to Window Chicago, glittering below like circuit board. Her empire, her kingdom of glass and steel and medical technology patents. Down there somewhere, Marcus was probably finishing his warehouse shift before heading here to start his custodial one. She pulled up foundation program files on laptop healthcare reentry program tax write-off she'd created for good publicity scholarships she'd funded without meeting single recipient. Never cared to. They were line items in budget good optics for investors, nothing personal. Until now. The man who saved her life cleaned her building. The mathematics of that kept circling her brain, trying to find angle that made it make sense. She picked up, phone-dialed Dr. Margaret Chen, who ran the program. Margaret answered on third ring, voice thick with sleep. Elena apologized for the hour, but needed information. They had protocols for fast-tracking exceptional candidates right. Margaret confirmed, adding that Elena had never asked about individual participants before. Elena explained she had good reason now. She'd found someone worth the investment. 11:58. Elena turned off main office lights, left only desk lamp burning. Settled into her chair facing the glass door where her name was etched in frost. She'd wait. He'd come. He came every night at midnight, pushing cart of cleaning supplies, emptying trash cans belonging to people who earned more in an hour than he made in a week. Tonight, she'd be here when he arrived. Tonight, she'd finally see the man who'd saved her life when 47 people chose to film instead. Marcus pushed his cart off the elevator at 11:58, headphones in, but music barely audible. Didn't need sound to block out thought, just needed something to focus on, besides the fact that he'd be doing this again tomorrow night and the night after, and every night until his body gave out, or eviction notices became unavoidable. He moved through empty offices on autopilot, 15 years of ICU precision now applied to trash removal. Empty bins replace liners, moved to next office, no thought required. Just muscle memory serving different God. He reached Elena Ashford's office glass door with her name etched elegant and imposing. CEO, Chief Executive Officer, the person whose trash he emptied without ever seeing her face. He unlocked door with his master key, stepped inside, flashlight beam cutting through darkness. Emptied her trash can, wiped down her desk, vacuumed her floor. Never looked at the papers on her desk, never examined the diplomas on her wall, never wondered about the life of someone who occupied this much expensive real estate. Just another office, just another job, just another night being unseen. The lights flared on behind him. Marcus spun, heart rate spiking, hand going to flashlight like weapon. Elena Ashford sat in her chair facing him, professional composure firmly in place, but something vulnerable underneath. She'd been waiting in the dark, watching. His first impulse was apology. Sorry, didn't know anyone was here, can come back later. She cut him off with a question. Did he recognize her? Marcus squinted against sudden brightness. Recognition hit like voltage. The plane. The woman dying in first class. His next observation came out too honest. She'd been dying yesterday. Now she was sitting in her office at midnight. Shouldn't she be hospitalized? Elena confirmed they'd met on the plane, that he'd saved her life, that he'd disappeared without leaving name. Marcus explained he'd had somewhere to be. His mother. Elena's expression shifted. She knew. She was sorry for his loss. Sympathy delivered professional and distant. Marcus felt defensive walls snap up immediately. How could she possibly know about his mother? Elena admitted she'd wanted to thank him, so she'd found out who he was. The implications sank in slowly. She'd investigated him, run background check, hired someone to dig into his life. Marcus's laugh came out bitter. Well, congratulations. Now she knew where the man who saved her life worked, emptying her trash for $13 an hour. He turned back to his cart, shoulders tight. 40 more offices before shift ended. He needed to keep moving. Her voice stopped him. Please wait. There was something in her tone that wasn't pity, wasn't charity, something that sounded almost like desperation. She wasn't here to make this awkward, just wanted to thank him properly. Marcus kept his back turned, jaw clenched. She was welcome. Now he really needed to finish his shift. She pressed forward despite his resistance. She ran a program for nurses, people who'd left and wanted to return, scholarships, training, housing, job placement. Marcus turned slowly. Why was she telling him this? The answer came direct, no flourish or preamble, because she wanted him in it. The offer hung between them in the fluorescent-lit office, too big to process, too loaded with implications. Marcus's first response was pure defense mechanism. He was out 12 years. Medicine had evolved new protocols, new medications, new equipment he wouldn't even recognize. She countered that skills like his didn't expire, just needed dusting off. His laugh was sharp. She didn't understand. He couldn't just walk back into hospital setting. Half the protocols were muscle memory he'd lost, medications where different equipment had updated beyond his knowledge base. He wouldn't know where to start. That's why the program existed: 6 months training, clinical rotations, recertification exam. They'd had nurses return after 10-year gaps. 12 years was nothing. Marcus asked the question that mattered. What did this cost? Elena's answer was simple: nothing up front. Full scholarship. Housing included. Child care support for Sophie. Health insurance for both. Everything covered. Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't want charity. The word came out harsh, years of accumulated pride compressed into one syllable. She reframed immediately: not charity. He'd work for it. 3 years in underserved communities after certification. He'd earn every penny through service. The mathematics still didn't work. Marcus laid it out: blunt eviction in 5 days, couldn't afford to bury his mother Sophie, working at Target to cover basic expenses. She'd done the research, she knew his financial situation. Why would Billionaire CEO invest $93,000 in someone who was objectively terrible risk? Elena stepped closer, meeting his eyes with something that looked almost like desperation. Because on that plane when she was dying, he'd seen a person who needed help. Not a billionaire, not a stranger, just someone who needed help. And he'd helped without hesitation or calculation or concern for personal cost. Her voice dropped quieter. Maybe she needed to remember what that looked like. Maybe she needed to learn how to do it herself. Marcus studied her face: expensive makeup, tailored clothes, manicured hands that had never done manual labor. She came from a completely different world, operated by completely different rules. His question came out guarded: what's the catch? She promised there wasn't one, just hard work and willingness to try. Marcus listed barriers again, each one feeling insurmountable. Getting evicted. Can't bury mother. Sophie's needs. He couldn't afford to take risks that might make everything worse. Elena interrupted gently. Program started Monday. Housing available immediately. As for funeral costs, she'd checked someone named Ray Sullivan had already handled it. She'd seen it in investigators' report, but didn't understand the connection. Marcus was surprised enough to show it. Ray was someone his mother had known. Veteran who'd paid for funeral unprompted. Told Marcus to pay it forward. Elena nodded slowly, understanding dawning. So Ray was already paying forward. Maybe she was doing the same. Maybe this was how it worked, help passed from person to person, creating chain reaction of second chances. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. Every fiber screamed to refuse. Pride demanded he decline. Fear insisted he was too old, too damaged, too far gone. But Grace's voice echoed in his head, "Promise me you won't be afraid to live again." And Ray's card sat in his pocket. "You're not alone in the fight." And Sophie's observation on the plane, "I forgot you used to save people." Elena must have seen something shift in his expression. She pulled business card from her pocket, set it on his janitor cart with careful precision. Her personal number. Call when he decided. She walked toward elevator heels, clicking on floor he'd just vacuumed. Marcus stood frozen, staring at the card. Elena stopped at elevator, turned back one final time. Marcus called after her. Why him? Out of all the nurses she could help, why choose someone with 12-year gap and bankruptcy and obvious trauma? Elena's answer was simple, but carried weight. Because he'd moved when everyone else froze. Because he'd seen someone needing help, and he'd helped. No questions asked. No hesitation. Just competence and compassion working in concert. The world needed more of that. She needed more of that. The elevator arrived. Elena stepped inside. Marcus found his voice asking what she really meant. Elena's response came quiet but firm. Think about it. He'd spent 15 years saving lives. He could do it again. Doors closed. She was gone. Marcus stood alone in empty hallway fluorescent lights, humming overhead janitor cart beside him. 2 business cards in his pocket, one from Billionaire CEO, one from Vietnam vet. Both offering same thing from different angles: stop hiding, start mattering again. Remember that experience doesn't disappear just because years pass. Grace's promise weighed on him. Sophie's hope. Ray's expectation. Elena's investment. He looked at her card on his cart-cheap cardstock with embossed lettering. Personal cell phone number. Call when you decide, she'd said. Not if. When. Like she already knew which way the decision would land. Maybe she did. Maybe she understood something he was still learning, that second chances didn't come from nowhere. They came from people brave enough to offer them and desperate enough to accept. He finished his shift on autopilot mind elsewhere. Chicago glowed outside the Windows City of second chances and broken promises and people trying to figure out which category they belonged to. By the time Marcus locked his cart in the custodial closet at 7:58 a.m., he'd already made his decision. Grace hadn't raised a quitter. Jennifer hadn't loved a coward. Sophie deserved a father who remembered how to fight. Ray had offered brotherhood. Elena had offered resources. The least Marcus could do was meet them halfway. He pulled out his phone, stared at Elena's number, took a breath that felt like stepping off a cliff, and dialed before fear could stop him. The phone rang once, twice. Elena answered on the 3rd ring voice alert despite the early hour. Marcus identified himself. She said she'd been waiting for his call. He told her simply and directly he was in. Whatever this took, however hard the work, however uncertain the outcome, he was in. Elena's relief came through clear even over phone static. Good. Program orientation, Monday 9 a.m. She'd have housing keys ready. They'd figure out the rest together. Marcus hung up, stood in custodial closet surrounded by mops and industrial cleaner janitor uniforms still on body, exhausted from double shift. But something had shifted. Some weight had lifted. He wasn't unseen anymore. He'd just chosen to be visible. Whatever came next Thursday with Ray's veterans, Monday with Elena's program, 3 years of service in underserved communities, recertification exams, and clinical rotations, and all the thousand small humiliations of starting over in middle age, it was better than spending the next 30 years emptying trash cans and forgetting he'd ever been someone who saved lives. Grace would be proud. Jennifer would understand. Sophie would have a father who finally stopped hiding. And somewhere in Chicago, Ray Sullivan would nod approval when Marcus showed up Thursday night ready to learn what brotherhood looked like when men decided they weren't finished fighting yet. The sun was rising over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in colors that meant new beginnings, if you believed in such things. Marcus Bennett walked out of Hancock Tower for the last time as a janitor. When he returned, it would be as something different, student maybe, or trainee, or eventually nurse again. But definitely not unseen. Never unseen again. The morning after accepting Elena's offer, Marcus sat at the wobbling kitchen table staring at his phone. The call had been made. The decision was real. Now came the terrifying part, actually following through. Sophie emerged from behind her curtain wearing the Target uniform she'd been hiding for 3 months. This time she didn't bother with excuses, just grabbed her backpack and headed for the door. Marcus called after her. They needed to talk about working. Sophie turned face set with inherited stubbornness. They needed the money. End of discussion. Marcus took a breath. Not anymore. He'd quit all 3 jobs yesterday, custodian, warehouse, handyman. Terrifying leap from barely surviving to depending entirely on program support. Elena's foundation was covering everything. Housing, childcare stipend, health insurance. Sophie could focus on school instead of covering their bills at Target. Sophie stared. He'd quit all of them. Marcus nodded. New apartment in Lincoln Park. 2 bedrooms. She'd finally have her own room with an actual door. They were moving this weekend. Sophie's eyes glistened, but she blinked it away fast. When did he become brave again? Marcus's throat tightened. Grace's promise. Ray's card. Elena's belief. Maybe courage was just running out of alternatives. Sophie crossed back, hugged him quickly, then pulled away before emotion could overwhelm them both. Okay, she'd quit Target today, but he better not screw this up. Marcus promised he wouldn't. After she left, he sat alone with Ray's card. Thursday, 7 p.m. VFW Hall. 1 week away. 7 days to prepare himself for whatever brotherhood looked like. His phone buzzed. Text from Elena's assistant, keys ready this afternoon. 2BR Lincoln Park, 1847. N. Larrabee St. Unit 4B. Fully furnished. Move-in ready. Marcus stared at the address. Lincoln Park. The kind of neighborhood where people jogged with expensive strollers and ate brunch that cost more than his weekly grocery budget used to. Another text. Program orientation. Monday, 9 a.m. Foundation, HQ 95th floor, Hancock Tower. Dr. Margaret Chen will meet you in conference room A, 95th floor. He'd cleaned that floor for 6 months. Now he was going there as student, not janitor. The vertigo of it threatened to overwhelm him. Wood paneling. American flag. Black and white photographs of service members who'd never made it home. The smell of old coffee and older memories. 6 men sat in a circle of metal folding chairs, ages 55 to 70, all carrying weight that showed in eyes and posture. Ray made introductions without ceremony. Eddie Chen, 61, Navy Corpsman, Desert Storm, 20 years emergency medicine before walking away in 2010. Back now at County General. Eddie nodded acknowledgement, sizing Marcus up with eyes that had seen triage under fire. He spoke with slight accent, deliberate and precise. Welcome to the island of misfit nurses. We don't bite, usually. Nervous laughter around the circle. James Foster, Big Jim 65. Army medic Iraq. Surgical nurse who'd left after his son died. Back in operating rooms 2 years now. Big Jim's voice was deep, carrying weight. Lost my boy to overdose. Fentanyl. Couldn't save him even with all my medical training. Walked away from medicine for 3 years. Ray dragged me back. The honesty was startling. No shame, no deflection, just truth. Carlos Reyes, 58, Marine Corps, Afghanistan. ICU background like Marcus. Left for PTSD, been back 4 years. Carlos's quiet intensity filled the space. First year back was hell. Jumped at every loud noise. Saw IEDs and trash cans. But it got better. Not easy, but better. Frank Sullivan, no relation to Ray 62. Air Force Gulf War. Former flight nurse, now ground-based after injuries ended flying career. Frank's graying beard shifted as he smiled. Can't fly anymore, but I can teach young punks how not to kill people. That's something. Tom Whitney, 70. Vietnam, like Ray. Field medic who'd left in 2008 when his wife got sick. She'd passed. He'd come back. Been working hospice 5 years now. Tom's eyes carried particular wisdom of someone who'd seen death so often it had become almost colleague. I hold hands now instead of starting IVs. Turns out that's just as important. Maybe more. Take a seat, son. 7 men in circle. Ray established ground rules with military precision. They didn't do feelings here. Didn't talk about pain or trauma or hidden wounds. Anyone wanting therapy could visit the VA. What they did was practical problem with program solve it. Forgot a skill drill it. Freaking out before shift talk through it with tactics, not emotions. We're here because we walked away and came back. That makes us brothers. Brothers look out for each other. Simple as that. Marcus found himself speaking before fully deciding to. He'd frozen during first clinical rotation. 4-year-old choking. Just froze completely. Silence followed, but it wasn't judgment. It was recognition. Carlos asked what triggered it. His daughter had been 4 when Jennifer died. The kid looked like her. Everything stopped working. Carlos nodded slowly. I froze during Code Blue once. Patient same age as my battle buddy who died in Kandahar. 23 years old. Same height, same build. For 3 seconds, I was back in that Humvee watching him bleed out, and I couldn't move. Marcus asked how he'd handled it. Finished the code. Saved the patient. Went to bathroom and threw up. Sat on floor for 10 minutes shaking. But next code, I was ready, because I knew it could happen. Your brain tries to protect you from trauma by freezing. Once you know that's what's happening, you can fight through it. Big Jim cut through with direct question, was Marcus going to freeze again? Marcus said he didn't know. Big Jim corrected immediately. Wrong answer. Right answer is maybe, but I'll snap out faster, because now I know what freezing feels like. You're not guessing anymore. You're prepared. Eddie asked Marcus's age. 52. Eddie leaned back. I was 54 when I came back. First week, some 25-year-old resident looked like he should still be in high school, talked to me like I was his confused grandfather. Very slow, very loud. Sir, do you need help finding the bathroom? Tom laughed. What did you do? Smiled real polite. Said no thank you. Then 2 hours later, there's a multi-vehicle accident, 4 critical patients. ER's chaos. Kids panicking, doesn't know where to start. I stepped in, ran triage, so smooth it looked choreographed. Prioritized patients, delegated tasks, had all 4 stabilized in under 15 minutes. Frank grinned. Let me guess. Kid apologized. Kid practically cried, apologizing. Best revenge is competence. They expect us to be obsolete. We prove them wrong by being better. The phrase landed with weight. These men understood mathematics of proving yourself when everyone assumed you were finished. Tom Whitney leaned forward, gaze direct. He asked Marcus why he was really there. Not the surface answer, the real one. Marcus hesitated. Ray invited me. Tom waved that away. You're here because you're about to walk into a world that has forgotten you exist. Hospitals don't want us. They want 25-year-olds with fresh degrees and no baggage. Cheap compliant, no opinions. We're expensive opinionated, and we've seen enough to know when protocols are wrong. So why do this Tom's answer came slow and deliberate? Because you're better than those 25-year-olds. Not smarter, better. You have 15 years they'll never possess. You've made decisions in seconds they couldn't make in hours. You've held dying patients' hands and told families their loved one was gone. You've cleaned up after codes that failed and wondered if you could have done something different. That weight they're carrying around. We've been carrying it so long, we know how to walk with it. He paused. Let that sink in. You're not competing with young nurses. You're showing them what they'll become if they're lucky enough to survive this work. And that's worth more than any test score. Ray cut through philosophy with tactical concern. Marcus had entrance exam in 2 days. Pharmacology was killing him, beta blockers specifically. Eddie shifted into drill sergeant mode immediately. All right, rapid fire. Metoprolol, carvedilol. Atenolol, which one for acute MI? Marcus stumbled through answer. Metoprolol. Eddie's response was sharp but not cruel. Correct, but you hesitated. In the field, hesitation kills people. It's metoprolol. Period. Atenolol if patient can't tolerate it. Carvedilol is for heart failure, completely different indication. This is basic. You need to know it like you know your own name. Carlos joined in. Dosages? Go. Marcus's mind went blank. I can't. Carlos didn't let him finish. 25 to 50 milligrams twice daily for metoprolol. Write it down. Say it out loud. Tattoo it on your arm if you have to. You're going to kill someone if you can't remember basic pharmacology. Frank added his own test. ACE inhibitors, list 3. Lisinopril, enalapril, ramipril. Frank nodded. Good. Side effects, dry cough, hyperkalemia, angioedema. Big Jim asked Ray directly if Marcus was ready for the exam. Ray's assessment was honest, not yet, but he would be. Marcus was staying after. They'd drill pharmacology until he could recite it unconscious. Marcus tried to protest about getting home to Sophie. Tom shut him down without sympathy. Call her. Tell her you'll be late. She's 16, not 6. She can handle dinner alone. If you want to survive this program, you need to stop thinking like janitor and start thinking like someone whose decisions determine whether people live or die. That means staying late when you need to. That means sacrifice. That means putting in work the 25-year-olds won't. Marcus pulled out phone, texted Sophie he'd be late. For the next 2 hours, 7 men drilled him on medications with relentless repetition. Eddie would shout a drug class. Marcus had to name 3 medications, their indications, dosages, side effects. If he hesitated, they'd make him start over. Carlos focused on cardiac meds, beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, calcium channel blockers, anticoagulants. Frank hammered respiratory drugs, bronchodilators, corticosteroids, mucolytics. Big Jim tested antibiotics. Broad-spectrum, narrow-spectrum common organisms, resistance patterns. Tom the oldest had the most insidious method. He'd wait until Marcus was confident, then ask obscure questions designed to expose gaps. What's the antidote for beta blocker overdose? How do you reverse warfarin? What's the difference between warfarin and heparin mechanism? No sympathy, no hand-holding, just aggressive competence transfer. That only worked when delivered by people who'd walked exactly this path. By 9 p.m., Marcus's brain was mush, but he could recite drug protocols without thinking. Ray finally called time. Good enough for tonight. Go home. Review everything once before bed. Get actual sleep, 6 hours minimum. Your brain needs rest to retain information. Marcus stood legs stiff from sitting. Eddie clapped his shoulder. You're doing fine. Better than I was my first week. Big Jim added, remember, we were all terrified. Every single one of us. That's normal. What matters is you showed up. Tom's final advice. Trust yourself. You knew this stuff once. It's still in there. Just needs dusting off. Marcus thanked them, voice rough with emotion he refused to fully acknowledge. Ray walked him to the door. Thursday, same time. Don't be late. Marcus drove home through Chicago streets, exhausted, but feeling something that might have been hope. 3 hours. 200 questions. Everything he'd crammed into his head for the past month. Marcus walked out feeling hollowed out, uncertain if he'd passed or failed spectacularly. His phone rang before he'd made it to parking lot. Ray's voice carried satisfaction that almost approached warmth. Dr. Chen just called me. 97th percentile. Third highest score in program history. Not bad for an old man who thought he'd forgotten everything. Marcus found himself laughing despite exhaustion. I couldn't have done it without Thursday night. Ray agreed without false modesty. Damn right. That's what we're there for. Now the real work starts. Clinical rotations are where most people wash out. Book knowledge is one thing. Actual patients are different. Marcus asked for advice. Trust your instincts. The training's still there, just needs dusting off. And when you freeze, because you probably will, don't panic. Acknowledge it. Breathe, refocus. You've got this. See you Thursday for trauma scenarios. Bring your A game. Afternoon. Shift. Marcus shadowing Patricia, 55-year-old veteran nurse whose skepticism about re-entry nurses was evident in every instruction. You're Bennett, the one who scored 97th percentile, Marcus confirmed. Patricia's expression suggested skepticism. Tests are easy. Patients are hard. Let's see what you've got. Shift had been relatively calm. Marcus observed Patricia's efficiency, economy of movement, rapid assessments, zero wasted energy. 15 years of ER nursing compressed into pure competence. Then mother burst through doors carrying 4-year-old boy. Face already blue, hands at throat, not breathing, choking emergency. Patricia's head snapped toward commotion already moving. Bennett, with me. Now Marcus turned and saw the boy 4 years old, Sophie's age, when Jennifer died, same dark curls, same small frame. His vision tunneled. The boy wasn't in Patricia's arms anymore. He was Sophie, 4 years old, screaming in northwestern delivery room corner, while Jennifer bled out, and Marcus stood frozen as husband not doctor, completely fucking useless, while his wife died. Patricia shouting for suction voice, cutting through his dissociation. Bennett, suction now. He stood frozen, completely non-functional. All that ICU training evaporated under weight of trauma that hadn't healed. Patricia saw it, swore with creative proficiency. Forget it. Get out of my way. She pushed past him, grabbing equipment, positioning herself to save the kid. Marcus was too paralyzed to help. Then voice cut through from behind. Military bark that penetrated where nothing else had. Bennett. Snap out of it. Marcus turned. Ray Sullivan stood at ER entrance wearing visitor badge, had been here dropping off paperwork for his own shift at County General, happened to witness Marcus's complete failure. Ray walked over with calm that only came from managing far worse situations than this. His voice was firm, but not cruel. "You're frozen. I can see it. But that kid's not Sophie. And that mother's not Jennifer. Focus on what's real, right here, right now." Marcus tried to speak, managed only whispered confession. "I can't." Ray cut him off. "Yes, you can. I watched you drill this scenario 100 times Thursday night. Pediatric airway obstruction. What's the protocol?" Marcus's training kicked in automatically, words coming out on muscle memory. Back blows. Heimlich modified for children. Suction standby. Ray's voice dropped to command tone. "So do it. Right now. Move." Something in Ray's voice, absolute certainty, combat-tested command presence, snapped Marcus back to functional. His hands moved. He crossed to Patricia. "I've got suction." She glanced at Ray, seemed to understand something. Unspoken, nodded and continued working. Together, they executed protocol with precision born of decades combined experience. Back blows with exact angle and controlled force. Heimlich positioning Marcus's hands, remembering the modified technique for small bodies. Obstruction, dislodging grape intact, expelled with force. Boy coughed, breathed, cried. Beautiful sound. Mother collapsed in relief, grabbing her son, sobbing. Patricia was already documenting moving to next task. Crisis managed moving on. Marcus stood there, hands still shaking from adrenaline crash. Afterward, Patricia pulled Marcus into hallway. Ray stood nearby, waiting. Patricia asked what the hell that had been voice sharp. Marcus tried to apologize, but Ray interrupted. He froze. First time back in field setting after 12 years out. It happens. Patricia studied Ray, recognition dawning in her expression. She knew about Ray's group. Everyone at County knew about Thursday night veterans who helped each other stay functional. "You're Ray Sullivan. I've heard about your group." Ray just nodded. Patricia turned back to Marcus, expression softening slightly. "You snap out of it," Marcus confirmed. Patricia exhaled. "Then you're doing better than I did my first week back." I froze for 30 seconds during a code, nearly lost a patient. The training's still there. You just proved it. You came back. That's what matters. Ray agreed from his position. "Next time this happens, and it might remember what I said. Focus on what's real. Right now. Right here. Not then. Not what if. Now." Patricia told Marcus the next code would be his. No excuses. You need to prove to yourself you can do this. She walked away, leaving Marcus with Ray. Marcus tried to thank him, voice rough. Ray waved it off. "I wasn't here by accident. Dr. Chen called yesterday. Said you had first clinical today. Asked me to swing by after my shift ended. We look out for our guys. That's how this works." Marcus was surprised enough to show it. "She does that for all program participants," Ray confirmed. "All the ones in the group?" "Yeah. Dr. Chen knows Thursday night crew. She trusts us to provide oversight. The program can't. We're not just support group. We're safety net." Pause. Ray told Marcus he'd done good. Froze, but came back. That was what mattered. Most people never come back after freezing. They quit, make excuses. Blame the program. You fought through it. That takes balls. Marcus asked what happened if he froze again. Ray's answer was simple, delivered with absolute certainty. Then you come back again. Every time. As many times as it takes. Eventually, freezing stops being option because your brain learns the pattern. trauma response, adrenaline spike, conscious override, return to function. You just added that pathway to your neural network. Next time will be faster. He clapped Marcus's shoulder with enough force to be felt reminded him Thursday they were running trauma scenarios and Marcus would need the practice. Then Ray left back to his own section of hospital, leaving Marcus leaning against wall trying to process that he'd frozen during his first real test, and somehow that was acceptable because he'd eventually functioned. The hall had been transformed into makeshift trauma bay. Medical dummies on floor positioned at different injury severities. Practice equipment borrowed from hospital supply backboards. C-collars, IV kits, oxygen masks. Scenario cards, Ray had clearly spent hours preparing each one detailing specific trauma case with vitals injuries complicating factors. Marcus ran triage drills while Carlos deliberately created chaos around him, shouting, throwing things, simulating the sensory overload of actual mass casualty incident. Eddie corrected technique with aggressive precision that only worked coming from someone who'd already made every possible mistake. No, you're spending too long on assessment. 3 seconds per patient in triage. Immediate, delayed, minor, expectant. That's it. Move. Tom watched from side, offering observations about breathing patterns and stress management that came from decades of hospice work. I can see your shoulders tensing. That's fear response. Breathe from diaphragm, not chest. Slows heart rate, improves decision-making. Frank timed everything with stopwatch, calling out seconds, 8 seconds on that assessment. Combat triage is 3. Faster. They ran scenarios until Marcus's decision-making compressed from 8 seconds to 3, then 2. Big Jim declared Marcus had the skills, just needed confidence and repetition. Ray agreed. The knowledge is there. Now we're building muscle memory so you don't have to think. When chaos hits, thinking gets people killed. Training takes over. After drills ended, group sat in circle for informal debrief. Tom asked about Sophie, surprising Marcus with shift to personal territory. How's your daughter handling all this? Marcus admitted she'd been working at Target for 3 months without his knowledge. Frank asked whether she was supporting or resenting him. Probably equal parts both. Tom nodded understanding. My daughter was 15 when I went back to nursing after my wife died. Thought I was abandoning her. Would barely talk to me for 6 months. What did you do? Let her be mad. Didn't try to fix it or explain it away. Just kept showing up. Made her breakfast every morning even when she wouldn't eat it. Left notes in her lunch even when she threw them away. Eventually, she saw I was doing it for both of us, that I needed purpose to survive the grief. Took time, but we got there. Sophie's 16, old enough to understand you're trying. She'll come around. Eddie added his experience. My son was in college when I went back. Told me I was too old, should just retire. Know what changed his mind? He got sick, ended up in ER where I worked, saw me in action. Afterward, he said, Dad, I didn't know you could do that. Sometimes people need to see you in your element to understand. Ray shut down family therapy conversation with tactical efficiency, but gently. All right, enough feelings. Marcus, you're running trauma scenarios again. This time we're adding complication. You've got limited supplies. 2 patients, critical, only 1 ambulance available. Who gets transported first and why? For next hour, they drilled until Marcus's hands moved faster than conscious thought, until decisions became instinct. This was male mentorship stripped to essential components, tough, practical, effective, and somehow deeply caring despite the gruff exterior. County General midweek. Marcus found rhythm. Still nervous, still second-guessing, but moving with increasing confidence through patient assessments. Current patient was Mrs. Kowalski, 71, admitted for chest pains. Likely angina, possibly MI, waiting for cardiology consult and test results. Marcus monitored vitals, adjusted her IV, kept her comfortable and calm, while bureaucracy ground through its processes. Ray was working same shift, different section of ER, but Marcus had learned Ray always maintained situational awareness of where his Thursday night guys were positioned. Mrs. Kowalski observed Marcus was good at this. Really good. Not just going through motions, you're actually present with me. Marcus deflected modestly. Just doing my job, ma'am. She studied him with eyes that had learned to read people over 7 decades. How long have you been doing this? Marcus paused before answering. Used to do it 15 years. Took some time away. Now I'm back. She didn't ask why he'd left. Instead, she noted as simple statement of fact, you lost someone. Marcus's hands stilled on oxygen tube he was adjusting. Mrs. Kowalski continued without requiring confirmation. My husband died 3 years ago. Heart attack. Dropped dead in our kitchen making coffee. Gone before paramedics arrived. She paused. Let that sit. After he died, I started noticing things I'd never seen before. Could tell the good nurses from the bad ones instantly. Want to know the difference? Marcus met her eyes. You're present. Really present. Most nurses, especially the young ones, they're competent but distracted. Thinking about their next patient, their shift ending their own problems. Going through motions efficiently, but not really seeing the person in the bed. She looked at Marcus's careful movements, his attention fully on her comfort. You see me. You're here with me in this moment, not already planning your next task. That's rare. Don't lose that. Marcus felt throat tighten. He promised quietly he'd try not to. She corrected immediately, voice stern but kind. Don't try. Do. World needs more people who really see others, especially in medicine. That's what separates adequate nurses from great ones. Later during his break, Ray found him in the staff lounge. Saw you with Mrs. Kowalski. Good work. Marcus asked if Ray was monitoring him constantly, voice carrying more curiosity than annoyance. Ray didn't apologize. That's part of mentoring. Making sure you don't develop bad habits early. Easier to correct now than 6 months from now. He paused. Mrs. Kowalski was right, by the way. You're present in ways most nurses aren't, especially re-entry nurses. A lot of guys coming back, they're so focused on proving competence, they forget the human element. You haven't. That's good. But it also makes the work harder, Ray continued. Because caring that much means every loss destroys you. Every patient who doesn't make it, every family you have to give bad news to it, cuts deeper when you're actually connected. Marcus agreed, voice heavy. That's why I left. When you care that intensely, the failures become unbearable. Jennifer's death wasn't just a loss, it was proof I wasn't good enough when it mattered most. Ray's response came from earned wisdom delivered without judgment. I tried not caring for 10 years after Vietnam. Turned myself into machine. Work home, drink, sleep, repeat. No connections, no emotions, no vulnerability. Know what that got me? Marcus waited. 10 years of being alive, but not living. Woke up one morning, looked in mirror, didn't recognize the man staring back. Realized I'd rather feel pain than feel nothing. At least pain meant I was still human, still capable of connection. He met Marcus's eyes. The difference between good nurses and great ones feel the fear, feel the loss, feel the weight, and they work anyway. They don't let the fear paralyze them or turn them into machines. They carry it, and they keep showing up. Marcus absorbed that, turning it over. Ray stood to leave, then added one more thing. You're doing good, Bennett. Better than you think. Trust yourself. Marcus sat alone at corner table, same pharmacology textbook page he'd read 9 times, final exam looming in 6 hours, brain refusing to absorb any more information. Door opened. Elena entered wearing jeans and Yale sweatshirt, no makeup hair and messy ponytail, looking more human than Marcus had ever seen her. She asked if he couldn't sleep either. Marcus explained he was past sleeping, just trying to absorb beta blockers through sheer force of will and failing spectacularly. Elena crossed to vending machines, got 2 coffees, despite the late hour, slid one across table to Marcus. How's the program treating you? Hard. Harder than expected. But that's probably the point. Elena noted she'd heard about the incident in ER. The freeze. Marcus stiffened slightly. Dr. Chen's weekly reports covered all students, part of the oversight, so Elena knew about his failure. She corrected immediately, not failure. Setback. There's a difference. You recovered. That's what matters. Marcus pointed out 4-year-old had been unable to breathe while he stood there like statue, completely useless. Elena's voice was gentle but firm. You weren't useless. You were traumatized. Those are different things. She paused, seeming to make decision. My mother was a nurse. Did I mention that? Marcus shook his head. Pediatric oncology. 28 years. She saw children die weekly, sometimes daily during bad stretches. Watched families destroyed by leukemia, brain tumors, neuroblastoma. Things no parent should ever face. Elena's voice carried old pain, mostly healed, but still tender. When I was 16, I asked her how she did it, how she kept showing up knowing so many kids wouldn't make it. She told me something I've never forgotten. Marcus waited. She said, every child I save justifies every child I lose. And even the ones who don't make it deserve someone who sees them as people, not statistics. That's what I give them, dignity in their hardest moments. Elena met Marcus's eyes. She worked herself to death. Literally. 62 years old, massive stroke at the nurses' station. Gone in minutes. She'd been pulling double shifts because they were short-staffed. Refused to slow down because kids needed her. For years, I resented medicine for taking her. Built my company partly as revenge. I'd fix the system that killed her through overwork and undersupport. But sitting here now, watching you fight through trauma to come back to nursing, I finally understand what she was doing. She wasn't just saving kids. She was being present for families in their darkest moments. That mattered more than quarterly earnings or board meetings or any of the things I've spent my life chasing. The vulnerability in Elena's voice was startling. Marcus found himself speaking before fully deciding to. I'm sorry about your mother. Elena acknowledged it with small nod. She would have liked you. Would have said, you're exactly the kind of nurse medicine needs, someone who hasn't forgotten why they started. Before Marcus could respond, door opened again. Ray entered with coffee thermos work boots and flannel, marking him as just off shift. Figured I'd find you here, he said to Marcus, then noticed Elena. Ma'am. Elena stood, extending hand. We meet again. Thank you for what you did in the ER. Ray shook her hand firmly. Just doing what needed doing. Same as Marcus would have done for any of my guys. He sat down without invitation, pulled out his own mug, poured coffee from thermos. Next 30 minutes were surreal. Billionaire CEO, Vietnam veteran, middle-aged nursing student, all exhausted and caffeinated in empty cafeteria at 3 a.m. Ray drilled Marcus on pharmacology while Elena listened occasionally, asking questions that revealed she understood more than expected clinical terminology despite being business-focused. Ray noted she ran medical tech company. Should know this stuff. Elena explained she knew business side primarily, but her mother had been nurse and had made sure Elena understood basics. Used to quiz me at dinner table when I was in high school. What's the difference between systolic and diastolic pressure? Elena, if patient presents with chest pain, what are you ruling out? Ray nodded approval. Good woman, your mother. Medicine needs more families like that, people who understand the work from inside. Elena's voice went quiet. She worked herself to death at 62. I used to think that was medicine's fault. Now I think she just loved it too much to stop. Ray understood that pattern immediately, voice-carrying recognition. Some people are built for this work in ways that consume them. They can't walk away, because walking away means abandoning people who need them. Your mother sounds like she was one of those. Did it work for you? Walking away, Ray's answer was blunt. No. Tried for 10 years after Vietnam. Drank too much, isolated too much, hated myself too much. Finally realized running from it hurt more than facing it. He turned to Marcus, which is why you're not making my mistakes. You're going to pass this exam, get certified, spend next 20 years actually living instead of hiding. Doesn't mean it'll be easy. Means it'll be worth it. Marcus observed he'd be 72 in 20 years, voice carrying skepticism. So what, Tom Whitney's 70, still working hospice full-time, still making difference. I'm 68, still doing trauma shifts. Age is just number. What matters is whether you're still capable and still willing. You're both. Elena agreed. You're not starting over, Marcus. You're continuing with 15 years of experience and 12 years of perspective. That's actually advantage, not disadvantage. Marcus looked between them, billionaire and veteran, completely different worlds, both showing up at 3 a.m. because they decided his success mattered. How did my life become this? Two people I barely know. Treating me like family. Ray's response was matter of fact. Because you're too stubborn to quit and too proud to ask for help. So we're forcing support on you, whether you want it or not. Elena added with a small smile. Consider it intervention, but the good kind. Marcus almost laughed, exhaustion breaking through into something lighter. Ray stood after another 30 minutes of drilling. Going home to sleep 3 hours before my shift. You should too. Study another hour maximum, then sleep. Your brain needs rest to consolidate information. Staying up cramming just makes you stupid. He left military efficiency applied to everything, including exits. Elena stayed nursing her cold coffee. Marcus observed Ray was intense. Elena agreed, voice warm. But he cares. Really cares. That's rare. Marcus met her eyes. So do you. Elena held his gaze, acknowledging it without words. Moment hung between them, something shifting, neither quite willing to name it yet. Elena broke it gently. Get some sleep, Marcus. You're going to pass this exam. How do you know? Because you have entire team ensuring you succeed. Me, Ray, Dr. Chen, the Thursday group. Sophie, you're not alone anymore, whether you want to be or not. She stood, gathered her things. And Marcus. For what it's worth, I'm glad I hired those private investigators. If I hadn't, I wouldn't have found you. Wouldn't have realized what really matters. She left before he could respond. Marcus sat alone in empty cafeteria coffee, going cold, but feeling warmer than he had in years. Foundation Gala arrived like approaching storm Marcus had been dreading for weeks. He stood in ballroom wearing suit Elena had sent tailored expensive fitting perfectly because she'd somehow obtained his measurements, trying to make himself disappear through sheer force of will. Crystal chandeliers throwing prismatic light, champagne towers catching reflections, 500 people in designer clothes worth more than cars. Elena found him near appetizer table looking like he wanted to bolt. You look terrified. He confirmed her assessment without shame. Absolutely terrified. She said that meant he cared, which was good thing. She took his arm to introduce him to cluster of donors. This is Marcus Bennett, participant in our healthcare re-entry program. Former ICU nurse returning to practice after 12-year gap. Donors nodded politely, smiles not reaching eyes, clearly uninterested in scholarship recipients. They wanted to talk about tax deductions and naming opportunities, not actual people being helped. Marcus started relaxing marginally after third identical interaction. Maybe he could survive this. Just smile. Nod fade into background. Be invisible again. Old habit dying hard. Then he felt eyes on him. Different kind of attention. Predatory. Damian Ashford stood across Ballroom 45, an expensive suit that probably cost more than Marcus's monthly rent, used to be watching Marcus with smile that carried nothing warm. Recognition and calculation in his eyes. Marcus asked Elena quietly who that was. Her face hardened instantly, voice going cold. My brother, Damian. Marcus hadn't known she had brother. She'd never mentioned family. Elena explained in clipped tones. Damian's wanted my chair 15 years. Spent that entire time waiting for me to stumble. Make mistakes he could weaponize. He's patient, methodical, dangerous. Damian crossed ballroom, moving through crowd like shark through water, extending hand toward Marcus with practiced charm. Sister, you look radiant as always. Quite the successful event. Elena's greeting could have frozen nitrogen. Damian. Damian turned full attention to Marcus' handshake, too firm grip, designed to establish dominance and assess threat simultaneously. And who might this be? Always interested in meeting our scholarship recipients. Elena introduced Marcus tersely. Marcus Bennett, program participant. Damian's smile widened, showing too many teeth. Interesting. Your name sounds remarkably familiar, Mr. Bennett. I never forget a face. Have we met before? Marcus said they hadn't, keeping voice neutral. Damian studied him with intensity that felt invasive. Strange, I could swear. What did you do before the program? Nursing, ICU. And why did you leave such prestigious work? Personal reasons. Damian's smile turned knowing, predatory. How mysterious. You know Elena always did have weakness for damaged strays. Found her first puppy in dumpster when she was 7. Brought home every broken thing she found after that. Elena's voice could have cut glass. That's enough, Damian. Just making conversation, sister dear. Just curious about how foundation resources are being allocated. Transparency matters to donors. He turned back to Marcus. Well, best of luck, Mr. Bennett. I'm sure you'll do adequately. Dismissed. Damian walked away, leaving implications hanging. Marcus asked Elena what that was really about. Elena watched her brother disappear into crowd, jaw tight. Power play. He's trying to rattle me by going after program participants. Make me doubt my decisions. It's what he does. An hour later, lights dimmed. Crowd turned toward stage. Damian stood at microphone, smile perfectly calibrated. Before we continue with evening's festivities, I have matters regarding foundation operations that require public address. Board accountability, you understand. Elena went rigid. What the hell is he doing? Screen behind Damien illuminated. Photographs appeared massive and damning. Marcus and Elena having coffee at Foundation Cafeteria, walking toward Marcus's apartment building. Elena's Mercedes parked outside timestamp showing 11:43 p.m. Suit being fitted at Marcus's door. Late night encounters. 3 a.m. cafeteria scene taken from security footage. Damien's voice carried across ballroom perfectly modulated concern. My sister's recent behavior has raised questions among board members. Questions about appropriate boundaries between CEO and scholarship recipients. He clicked to financial breakdown slide numbers massive on screen. This particular recipient, Mr. Marcus Bennett, former custodian at this very building, has received extraordinary support. Housing subsidy $24,000 annually. Full tuition coverage $45,000. Childcare stipend $18,000. Funeral costs personally paid $3,500. Additional expenses $2,800. Pause for effect. Total investment $93,300 for one individual. Meanwhile, my sister personally supervises his progress. Private meetings, late-night encounters, visits to his home. Gasps rippled through crowd like wave. Phones rising to document scandal. Damien continued voice-dripping false concern. I'm not suggesting anything improper. Perfect pause for implication to sink in, spread, metastasize. I'm simply asking, does this represent appropriate use of donor funds, or has our CEO confused philanthropy with personal interest? 500 pairs of eyes turned to Marcus and Elena simultaneously. Whispers multiplied, spreading through ballroom like virus. That's him, the janitor. She's sleeping with him, completely inappropriate. My donation funded this board, needs to investigate. Marcus felt every stare like brands burning into skin. Every fear he'd carried for weeks confirmed in single moment. Charity case, doesn't belong, fraud, using her, gold digger. Elena grabbed his arm urgently, voice desperate. Marcus, please don't react. This is exactly what Damien wants. Stay. We'll fight this together. Marcus pulled away, gently, voice defeated. He's right. I don't belong here. Elena's eyes glistened, but she didn't cry. You belong here because you earned it. Don't let him take that from you. Marcus looked at this woman from different world offering partnership that felt impossible. Surrounded by 500 people who saw him as exactly what Damien described, charity case, benefiting from inappropriate relationship. I was never meant to be here. I'm exactly what he said. He walked. Not running, pride wouldn't allow it. But every pair of eyes carved pieces from him. Every whisper was knife. Every phone camera was witness to his humiliation. Through crowd that parted like he carried disease. Phones flashing like paparazzi. Judging faces everywhere. Through kitchen door down service corridor he'd once cleaned out into cold Chicago night. Gone. Elena stood alone in ballroom Damien, smiling triumphantly on stage 500 people, whispering, documenting, sharing scandal in real time. Sophie emerged from bathroom where she'd been fixing her dress when everything exploded. Seeing aftermath. Photos still displayed on screen. Her father's empty seat. Elena standing, isolated, abandoned. Sophie's face hardened with inherited Bennett stubbornness. She crossed ballroom to Elena, ignoring stares. He'll be back. My dad doesn't quit. Grandma made him promise. Elena looked at this 16-year-old with absolute certainty in her voice. How do you know? Because Bennetts don't quit. He just needs time to remember that. Dark. Marcus on couch. Lights off. Jennifer's ring in hand. Phone buzzing repeatedly. Elena calling. He let every call go to voicemail. Text messages accumulated. Marcus, please let me explain. This isn't your fault. Don't give up. I need you to hear me out. Marcus turned off phone completely. Sophie appeared in doorway, still wearing gala dress Elena had given her, beautiful thing that probably cost more than their old monthly rent. What are you going to do? Marcus said. He didn't know, voice hollow. Are you going to quit? When Marcus didn't answer, Sophie sat beside him. If you quit now, he wins. That asshole in expensive suit who humiliated you in front of 500 people gets exactly what he wanted. Marcus told her to watch language automatic response. She pointed out she was 16 and had heard significantly worse at Target. She looked at him with Jennifer's eyes, Grace's determination. You know what I remember about Mom. She told me you were bravest person she knew, that you ran towards scary things when everyone else ran away, that you saved people others gave up on, voice cracking slightly. I was 4 when she died. 12 years I watched you disappear. Work 3 jobs. Pretend survival was enough. It wasn't. Grandma knew it. I knew it. Now you finally started fighting again and you're going to let some rich asshole make you quit. Marcus tried to say he'd been trying his best. Sophie cut him off, voice fierce. I know you were trying. But trying to survive isn't the same as trying to live. She stood, walked to doorway, turned back. Ms. Elena didn't save you, Dad. You saved yourself. She just reminded you that you could. Don't let some asshole brother take that away, because he's scared of what you represent. What do I represent? Sophie's answer was immediate. That experience matters more than pedigree. That people can come back from loss. That 52 isn't too old. Everything Damien's terrified the board will realize. She went to her room, leaving Marcus alone with her words echoing. Phone buzzed on coffee table where he'd left it. Different number despite being powered off, somehow getting through. Ray's text appeared on locked screen. Saw what happened. Thursday we talk. Don't do anything stupid before then. Another buzz. Elena again, message appearing despite phone being off. I'm sorry. This is my fault. But please don't give up. Please. Marcus picked up phone, powered it on, fully typed to both of them, same message. I'm not quitting, but I need time. Ray's reply came immediately. Time granted. See you Thursday. Don't be late. Elena's followed seconds later. Take all the time you need. I'll handle Damien. I promise. Marcus put phone down, sat in darkness. Publicly destroyed, humiliated, exposed. Everything he'd feared about being visible confirmed in single night. But his daughter's words echoed, Bennett's don't quit. Ray's text, don't do anything stupid. Elena's promise, I'll handle Damien. He wasn't alone anymore. Whether he wanted to be or not, he'd been seen. What came next would determine whether being visible was worth the cost of being vulnerable. Outside Chicago glowed against night sky. City of second chances and broken promises. City where people reinvented themselves daily. City where 52-year-old janitors became nurses again, if they were brave enough to keep showing up. 6 a.m. brought sharp knocking that pulled Marcus from something that wasn't quite sleep. He'd been sitting on the couch for hours, Jennifer's ring pressed into his palm, hard enough to leave an imprint. The knocking came again, insistent, urgent. Marcus opened the door, expecting Sophie returning from some early shift she hadn't mentioned. Elena Ashford stood in his doorway, wearing the same navy gown from the gala. Wrinkled now makeup streaked down her cheeks, barefoot with expensive heels dangling from one hand. Her hair had come loose from whatever professional arrangement it had held the night before. She looked like she'd walked through a war zone. Her voice came out raw, stripped of every bit of polish Marcus associated with corner offices and board meetings. I swear I didn't know. Damien's plan, the photographs, the public humiliation. I had no warning. He's been planning this for months, and I never saw it coming. Marcus stepped aside, voice flat. Come inside before you wake my neighbors. She entered slowly, taking in the apartment properly for the first time. The furniture held together with hope and duct tape. Sophie's drawings magnetized to a refrigerator that hummed too loudly. Medical textbooks stacked beside sticky notes covering every available surface. This was how the man who'd saved her life actually lived, and she'd never bothered to see it until now. Marcus handed her coffee that had been sitting on the warmer too long, bitter and over-extracted but hot. Her hands shook taking the cup. She started to apologize again, but Marcus cut through. What happened after I left, Elena sank into a kitchen chair that wobbled under her weight. Damage control mostly. My lawyers drafted press statements, angry donors threatening to pull funding, board members circling like sharks who'd smelled blood in the water. Damien positioned himself as the voice of fiscal responsibility and ethical oversight. She paused, voice cracking slightly. Damien's been building this attack for weeks. Private investigators following my movements 24/7. Surveillance equipment I never noticed. Every late night at the foundation, every visit to check on your progress, every moment of genuine concern documented and cataloged and twisted into something sordid. He was waiting for the perfect moment to weaponize my compassion. Marcus sat across from her at the table that had hosted conversations with Ray with Sophie with the ghost of his own doubts. He asked the question that mattered. Why, what does Damien gain from destroying his own sister? Elena's answer was simple, delivered with exhausted acceptance. He wants my chair. Always has. The best way to remove me isn't attacking the company, it's attacking my judgment. If the board believes I've lost objectivity, compromised professional boundaries for personal interest, they'll push me out voluntarily. Damien slides into CEO position without the messy complications of hostile takeover. Her voice went quieter. If he can make the board think I've confused philanthropy with romance, he wins everything. The company, the foundation, the legacy our mother built. Everything. Marcus studied her face, expensive makeup, smeared designer gown, wrinkled manicured hands trembling around a coffee cup. Vulnerable in ways he'd never seen her. He asked directly, "Have you lost objectivity?" The question hung between them. Elena met his eyes without deflection. Yes, but not the way Damien implies. She leaned forward. I started this program as tax strategy, good optics for investors. Started helping you because guilt demanded it after you'd saved my life. Somewhere along the way, it stopped being about guilt. Stopped being about the program entirely. Pause gathering courage. When I'm with you, I feel like a person instead of a quarterly earnings report. Someone who matters for reasons that have nothing to do with money or power or success. That terrifies me because I have no framework for processing it. I've spent 25 years building an empire, and I don't know how to just be human with someone. Marcus felt his throat tighten. He knew that feeling, he told her. The vertigo of wanting something beyond mere survival. Elena was surprised enough to show it. He understood. Marcus explained he'd spent 12 years convinced he didn't need anyone, that Sophie was sufficient, that making it through each day was acceptable endpoint. Then Elena had shown up offering second chances, and Ray had appeared with brotherhood, and suddenly survival wasn't enough anymore. Now he wanted more. Wanted connection, wanted purpose, wanted to feel like he mattered to someone beyond being a charity case. Something shifted in the space between them walls, lowering incrementally. Elena asked if he still felt that way, even after last night's destruction. Marcus considered the question honestly. Last night wasn't her fault, it was Damien's. The consequences were temporary. Damien wanted to destroy Elena by making this about them, so the solution was not letting him. Elena asked how. Marcus leaned forward. By me finishing the program. By proving every dollar, every hour of support. Every scholarship produced results that spoke for themselves. She'd believed in him when he was cleaning her office at midnight. Let him prove that belief was justified not for her or the board, but for everyone like him the system had discarded. Before Elena could respond, another knock interrupted. This time, Marcus recognized the pattern authoritative military precision exactly 3 seconds between each knock. He opened the door to find Ray Sullivan standing there in work clothes, coffee thermos in hand, looking like he'd come straight from his night shift. Ray's greeting was economical. Figured you'd be wallowing. Then he noticed Elena and nodded respect. Ma'am. Elena stood identifying herself properly. Ray acknowledged her as the billionaire who'd saved Marcus from himself. Elena's smile was small but genuine. Marcus saved me first. Ray addressed Marcus directly. 7 guys are waiting at the VFW right now wanting to know if Marcus quit or still has a spine. Marcus almost laughed despite everything. It's 6 in the morning. Ray pointed out they were old. They woke early. That's what happened when you survived long enough to know better. He looked between Elena and Marcus, assessing the situation with tactical efficiency. So what's the plan? Marcus going to let some rich boy in a suit destroy everything he's worked for? Marcus said, no voice carrying more conviction than he felt. Ray nodded satisfaction. Good, because he hadn't spent 3 weeks drilling pharmacology into Marcus's thick skull for him to quit now. Elena mentioned her board meeting at noon. Damien would try to tear her apart in front of 15 board members, use last night's scandal to force her resignation. Ray asked how she planned to fight back. Elena hesitated. Ray pressed she'd been saving ammunition. Right, smart people always did. Elena's smile was small but real. She might have something. Ray expressed zero surprise. She didn't build a $3 billion company by being careless. He turned back to Marcus. Board meeting. Marcus was going. Not a request. Marcus tried to object, but Ray rolled over him with military authority. Marcus would stand outside that boardroom and wait. When Elena won, and she would win, Marcus needed to be there. Show the board Damien show himself that he wasn't running. Marcus asked how Ray could be certain Elena would win. Ray directed the question to Elena instead. She was bringing FBI evidence on her brother, correct? Elena stared. How had Ray known Ray's explanation was matter-of-fact delivered with the certainty of someone who'd seen this exact pattern before? He was 68, had seen this movie multiple times. Rich people didn't attack unless they were dirty themselves. Power plays always had dirt behind them. She'd been investigating Damien for months, hadn't she? Elena confirmed 18 months of careful evidence gathering. Ray looked back at Marcus. See, she has it handled. Marcus's job was not quitting and showing up when it mattered. Sophie emerged from her curtained bedroom, taking in the strange tableau of her father, a billionaire in a ball gown, and a Vietnam veteran having a strategy session in their kitchen at dawn. She asked if everyone was having a meeting without inviting her. Ray addressed her directly. Her father was doing the program. Elena was going to destroy her brother. Sophie needed to go to school and act normal. If anyone asked about her father, say he was doing great. Don't give them gossip ammunition. Sophie studied Ray for a moment before declaring she liked him. Ray said he knew Grace had told him Sophie was smart. For the next 30 minutes, 4 people crowded around the wobbling kitchen table, planning strategy with military precision. Not feelings, not hand-wringing, pure tactics. Ray asked Elena whether she'd open with evidence or let Damien dig his hole deeper first. Elena said she'd let him dig, then bury him. Ray approved the instinct. Good strategy. Give him rope, let him hang himself. Then produce evidence when he's maximally exposed. He told Marcus to work his shift after the meeting business. As usual, no one gets ammunition to call him unstable or claim the scandal affected his competence. Sophie received instructions to maintain normal routine at school. Be visible, be confident, show no weakness. Ray Stood announced he was going home to sleep 3 hours before his afternoon shift. Marcus should study. Elena should prepare. Sophie should go to school. He paused at the door. Thursday night, they'd all celebrate Marcus not being a quitter. He expected Marcus there on time. Ray left military efficiency applied to civilian crisis management. Elena looked at Marcus once Ray had gone. She observed that Ray was extraordinary. Marcus agreed. Ray was Ray combat-tested, wisdom-earned loyalty, absolute. Sophie asked if Ray could come to family dinners. Marcus pointed out they didn't have family dinners. Sophie said they should start, then went to get ready for school. Elena and Marcus sat alone at the wobbling table. Elena spoke quietly. Whatever happens today at the board meeting, thank you. For not quitting. For believing this is worth fighting for. Marcus met her eyes. We're worth fighting for. Both of us. That's what Damien doesn't understand. Marcus and Ray waited in the hallway outside. Marcus sat on a bench leg, bouncing with nervous energy. Ray read yesterday's newspaper like he had nothing better to do, completely calm. Marcus asked why Ray was waiting. Ray said he wanted to see Marcus's face when Elena won. Marcus asked how Ray could be that confident. Ray's answer came from experience. 3 wars and 40 years of hospital politics taught you when someone held winning cards. Elena had the cards. Damien was bluffing. This was over before it started. Inside the boardroom, Damien positioned himself at the head of the mahogany table like he already occupied the CEO chair. Elena entered last, controlled and armed with evidence Damien didn't know existed. Damien opened by calling for full review of foundation expenditures, particular attention to healthcare re-entry program, and its special recipients. Board member Harrison Wells seconded immediately clearly Damien's plant. Dr. Margaret Chen objected from the far end this was personal vendetta, dressed as fiduciary responsibility. Damien insisted this wasn't personal, just protecting donor confidence. When a CEO spent foundation resources on romantic interests, questions needed answering. Elena corrected him immediately. Marcus Bennett wasn't her romantic interest. Damien asked her to explain the photographs then. The late nights, the personal attention, the funeral costs she'd paid personally. Elena said she had documentation for everything. She opened her laptop, projected files onto the screen behind her. Marcus Bennett had entered through normal application channels. Blind review by Dr. Chen's committee, she'd never seen his name until after acceptance. His entrance exam scored 97th percentile, 3rd highest in program history. Clinical evaluations were uniformly excellent. 4 patient lives saved during rotations documented and verified on hospital records. Board members leaned forward, reading the data themselves. Elena continued. Financial breakdown showed housing assistance identical to all participants' child care support standard across the program. The only expenditure outside normal parameters was funeral costs, which she'd paid from personal funds, not foundation budget. She had canceled check and receipt to prove it. Board members shifted, realizing this wasn't the scandal Damien had promised. Elena pressed forward. Yes, she'd spent time with Marcus outside program requirements. Yes, she'd visited his apartment to see how scholarship recipients actually lived. Yes, she cared about him personally. She looked directly at Damien, but caring about a scholarship recipient isn't criminal or even improper. It's what every philanthropist should do: actually know the people they claim to help instead of treating them as line items in a budget. Damien tried to salvage his attack by focusing on optics and appearances. Elena cut him off. The optics are whatever you make them, brother. She clicked to a new slide. You hired private investigators to follow me, took photographs out of context, staged public humiliation designed to destroy my credibility and advance your position. Another click. Financial records appeared on screen, damning in their detail. Offshore accounts, Cayman Islands, 1.8 to British Virgin Islands, 2.1 million Panama, 0.8 million wire, transfers 2021-2024. Shell corporations, 47 transactions, kickback schemes, 847K, fake vendor invoices, 1 team. Total embezzled, 4.7 million. Charges pending, securities fraud, wire fraud, tax evasion, RICO violations. The room went completely silent. Damien's face drained of all color. Board member Harrison Wells asked if this was real. Elena confirmed the SEC had been investigating for 18 months. She'd been cooperating quietly, building an airtight case, waiting to see how far Damien would go. She walked toward Damien slowly, voice shaking, not with tears, but with controlled fury. You wanted to destroy me by weaponizing compassion. You turned a good man's poverty into scandal. You used his pain, his loss, his struggle to advance your ambition. She stopped directly in front of him. And you did it while stealing millions from the company our mother built, while embezzling from the foundation meant to help people, while committing fraud against every donor who trusted us. Damien stood defensive. Elena, I can explain. Elena told him to save it for the FBI. The boardroom doors opened on cue. 2 FBI agents in dark suits entered, badges displayed. Agent Morrison identified himself and his partner, Damien Ashford. You're under arrest for securities, fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. They handcuffed him in front of 15 board members. Damien stared at his sister with betrayal and hatred competing in his eyes. He whispered that this wasn't over. Elena's response was quiet and final. Yes, it is. They led him away, handcuffs clicking with finality. In the hallway, Marcus and Ray heard the distinctive sound. Damien emerged flanked by agents, saw Marcus sitting there, and sneered. Enjoy it while it lasts, janitor. Ray stood immediately, stepped between them with military precision. His voice came out quiet, but dangerous. That janitor is worth 10 of you. And he's going to be saving lives long after you're out of prison. He told the agents to remove the garbage. They led Damien away. Elena came through the boardroom doors moments later, looking exhausted but victorious. She saw Marcus, saw Ray cross to them without hesitation. It's over. Marcus said he'd heard the handcuffs. Elena almost smiled. Damien won't be a problem anymore. Ray offered grudging praise. Well done, ma'am. Your mother would be proud. Elena was surprised by the observation. Ray explained that Grace had told him about Elena's mother, tough as nails and twice as smart. Apple hadn't fallen far. Elena thanked him genuinely. Ray told Marcus to get back to work, show everyone he wasn't rattled by scandal or gossip. Marcus confirmed. Ray added that Thursday night Marcus should bring Elena. She should meet the group properly. Elena said she'd like that. Ray nodded approval and left, giving them space. Marcus and Elena stood alone in the suddenly quiet hallway. She asked what happened now. Marcus said now he finished the program, got certified, became a nurse again. Then they figured out what came next. Elena asked what he wanted next. Marcus said he wanted to stop building walls. Wanted to let someone in. Wanted to see if whatever this was could become something real. Elena observed it would be complicated. Marcus agreed everything worth having was. They stood in the empty hallway, two people from different worlds who'd found each other anyway. 3:47 p.m. shift almost over. Then paramedics burst through entrance with a pregnant woman hemorrhaging on a gurney. Placental abruption. Blood pressure. Dropping need OB now, Marcus froze. But this time, it wasn't dissociation, and it was recognition. This was Jennifer's death playing out again right in front of him. Patricia appeared beside him, asking if he was with her. Marcus snapped back. He was with her. They moved together. The patient was Maria Santos, 38 weeks, pregnant, massive vaginal bleeding. Her husband beside her looked terrified, holding her hand like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to life. Marcus heard Jennifer's voice take care of our Rosie, but pushed it aside with conscious effort. He told the husband firmly, "We'll save them both." Patricia asked quietly if Marcus was sure about this. Marcus nodded. He was sure. They worked efficiently. Marcus established 2 large-bore IVs with hands that remembered the motions. Ordered O-negative blood. Applied fetal monitor. Heart rate dropping 110/95, 80/75. Dr. Morrison arrived asking for assessment. Marcus reported clinical findings with precision. Placental abruption, massive hemorrhage, fetal distress. They needed emergency C-section immediately. Dr. Morrison said they needed to wait for OB authorization. Marcus's voice came out firm, absolute. They didn't have time. Heart rate was 75 and dropping. Another 5 minutes meant losing them both. Dr. Morrison tried to invoke protocols. Marcus met his eyes. He knew the protocols. He also knew this woman was dying. He'd seen this exact scenario before, waited 52 minutes for authorization while a woman bled out. He wasn't watching it happen again. A voice came from behind Ray Sullivan, agreeing that Marcus was right. Ray addressed Dr. Morrison, directly identifying himself as trauma nurse with 40 years experience in military and civilian medicine. They'd both seen this scenario play out wrong too many times in their careers. They needed to act here now, immediately. Dr. Morrison studied them both. 2 re-entry nurses making command decision. Ray continued. He was 68 with 4 decades of experience. Marcus was 15-year ICU veteran. Between them, they had more medical hours than Dr. Morrison had been alive. This was the call to emergency C-section here, or watch 2 people die. Dr. Morrison made his decision. Emergency C-section here. Marcus would assist. Ray would be backup. They moved with coordinated precision. Marcus handed instruments with 15 years of ICU experience flooding back through his hands. Ray positioned nearby, ready if needed, but letting Marcus lead. This time, there were no insurance delays, no bureaucratic hurdles, no 52 minutes of waiting while someone bled out. Just competence and urgency and 2 experienced nurses who knew exactly what needed doing. The baby emerged not crying. Neonatal team took over, cleared airway, stimulated breathing. 1 second, 2, 3, 4. Then a cry. Strong, healthy, alive. Mother's bleeding slowed as Dr. Morrison sutured quickly. He told Maria she was okay. Her daughter was okay. Both would be fine. Maria found her husband's eyes both crying relief and joy. Marcus stepped back, hands shaking now that adrenaline was fading. Ray's hand landed on his shoulder, grounding him. Marcus had done good work. Marcus's voice came out rough. She didn't die. The woman didn't die. Ray confirmed, no, she didn't. Marcus felt realization settling into his bones, like medicine finally reaching the bloodstream. Jennifer had died because they'd waited, because someone decided money mattered more than lives, because protocols superseded humanity. But this woman lived because they'd acted, because experience trumped protocol when it mattered. Ray said that was the difference, knowing when to follow rules and when to break them. Marcus had just saved 2 lives, not 1. 2 people were alive because he'd trusted his training and his instincts. Jennifer would be proud. Marcus looked at the mother holding her baby. Both alive. Both safe. Both here because he'd remembered who he used to be and fought to become that person again. 12 years of carrying Jennifer's death as proof of his failure. Finally, closure arrived, not as forgetting, but as understanding that competence applied at the right moment could change outcomes, that his experience mattered, that he mattered. Patricia approached afterward, told Marcus that was exceptional work. Ray said he hadn't trained Marcus, just reminded him what he already knew. Marcus studied his hands, middle-aged, scarred, still steady, still capable. He told Ray he was ready for the certification exam. Ray agreed he was. VFW Hall. Thursday night. Marcus opened the email surrounded by 7 men who'd gathered early, waiting to share this moment. Marcus read in silence, then looked up. He'd passed. 96th percentile. Tom Whitney stood first, saluting with military precision. Welcome back to the profession, Nurse Bennett. The other 6 stood saluted with synchronized respect. Marcus stood saluted, back throat too tight for words. Ray broke the moment by asking who was buying beer. Marcus said he was. Frank agreed that was absolutely correct. They headed to the bar next door, 7 older men and 1 newly certified nurse, celebrating not just success, but survival, proving that experience didn't expire just because years passed. Marcus wore fresh scrubs and new ID badge, declaring his reclaimed identity, Marcus Bennett, RN, Emergency Department. Stethoscope around his neck with Elena's inscription, See the Invisible. Charge Nurse Linda welcomed him to the real world, assigned him to Trauma Team 2 for incoming multi-vehicle accident. Ray walked past, heading to Trauma Bay 1. Don't fuck it up, Bennett. Marcus grinned. Yes, sir. The trauma was intense, but Marcus functioned with everything he'd been 15 years ago, plus everything he'd learned in 12 years away. Dr. Morrison approached afterward. Good work in there, Bennett. 12-year gap, and you handled trauma like that. Most returning nurses can't find a vein on first try. Marcus credited good teachers and good reasons for coming back. Dr. Morrison told him to keep whatever those reasons were. They needed more nurses like Marcus. Elena sold her penthouse for $70 million, bought a 3-bedroom house in Lincoln Park with actual backyard. Sophie ran through empty rooms, shouting about outdoor space. Elena told Marcus that Sophie needed a dog. Marcus tried to object. Elena said they were getting one. No negotiation. Moving day brought not just the 3 of them, but Ray, with his truck, Eddie, and Carlos from the Thursday group. Brotherhood in action, 5 older men helping move furniture because that's what family did. They adopted a golden retriever puppy, Sophie, named Biscuit. Ray looked at the dog and said it reminded him of one he'd had in '73. Domestic scenes accumulated like photography developing Sunday pancakes where Elena only burned 1 batch. Sophie teaching Elena to braid hair with mixed results, all 3 on the couch for movie night's family dinner table that now regularly included Ray. Marcus worked at County General with increasing confidence training younger nurses in protocols and techniques he'd relearned. Elena presented to the foundation board about doubling scholarships, 200 nurses returning this year. Marcus co-led Thursday night group with Ray New Faces, joining weekly Marcus mentoring them the way Ray had mentored him. The generational transfer of wisdom was complete. Marcus brought Elena and Sophie back to Desert Memorial Garden where Grace was buried. Ray had come too at Marcus's request. They stood at the memorial bench overlooking the desert. Marcus explained this was where his mother was buried, where Elena had first offered him a second chance where everything had started changing. Elena said she remembered. Marcus pulled a small box from his pocket. Simple ring, elegant, not ostentatious. He wasn't going to promise forever. They were too old for fairy tales. But he could promise today, tomorrow, the day after that. As many days as they got. He didn't kneel, they were equals. He asked if she wanted to spend those days together. Elena looked at the ring at him, at Sophie, watching nearby, at Ray on the bench. She said yes. Marcus slid the ring on her finger. They kissed briefly, warmly real. Sophie called from her position without looking up from her phone. About damn time. Marcus told her to watch her language. Sophie pointed out she was 16 and he should deal with it. Ray added from beside Sophie that she was right. Sophie thanked him. Ray told Marcus and Elena not to screw this up, best advice that existed. Most people overthought relationships. Just show up for each other, rest would handle itself. Elena asked if Ray would come to the wedding. Ray said only if he could bring the group. Elena said she wouldn't have it any other way. Small ceremony, 50 guests, string lights and trees, Sophie as maid of honor. Dr. Chen officiated credentials obtained through questionable internet ordination. She spoke about 2 people meeting on a plane, one dying, one invisible, neither knowing what came next. Marcus delivered his vows with voice steady. Elena had seen him when he was emptying her trash at midnight. He promised to spend their remaining days seeing her truly not the CEO, not the empire, just Elena who taught him second chances existed. Elena's vows acknowledged Marcus teaching her what mattered, not quarterly earnings or board meetings, but people connection, courage to be seen. She promised to spend their days learning from him, learning to be present, learning to live rather than merely survive. They exchanged rings. Dr. Chen pronounced them married. They kissed. Biscuit barked approval. Ray stood for his toast, the VFW group standing with him, Eddie Carlos, Big Jim, Frank Tom. Ray admitted he wasn't good at speeches. Spent 40 years in hospitals and 3 wars. Learned to say things straight. 2 years ago, he'd met a man at his mother's grave who was convinced he was too old, too damaged, too far gone. Ray had told him what his own mentor had told him 30 years prior. You're not done until you decide you're done. Marcus at his table felt his eyes sting. Ray continued. Marcus Bennett was proof that experience didn't expire. That middle age wasn't the end, that a man could fall and get back up stronger for the journey. He was also proof you didn't do it alone. He'd had his daughter as mother before she passed Elena doctor. Chen all of them Thursday nights. Ray raised his glass. To Marcus and Elena, Two people who learned being seen was scarier than being invisible, but the only way to actually live. The group echoed the toast. Eddie stood offering toast to Ray for reminding all of them they weren't done yet. All 7 veterans saluted Marcus in military formation. Marcus saluted back. Elena wiped her eyes. Sophie cried openly. Tom added final observation to second chances to people who refused quitting to proving the world wrong about what 50, 60, 70 looked like. Everyone drank. Airplane to Boston for medical conference. Marcus, Elena, Sophie traveling together. Sophie at 17 reading pre-med college brochures. Marcus called her Rosie, and she didn't flinch anymore. She announced she wanted pre-med, wanted to do what her father did. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Jennifer would love that. Mid-flight commotion erupted in row 3. Medical emergency. Marcus and Elena both stood moved as synchronized unit honed by a year of working together, living together, being together. Elderly man clutching chest face gray. Marcus identified himself as a nurse, asked what the man was feeling. Chest pain left arm difficulty breathing. Elena already had the medical kit open. Possible MI. They needed aspirin oxygen AED standby. Marcus gave precise instructions to the flight attendant aspirin 325 milligrams oxygen notify pilot about emergency landing at nearest airport with cardiac facilities. They worked together with practiced efficiency. 15 minutes of coordinated precision. Patient stabilized. Paramedics waiting at Logan. Young flight attendant asked how they worked so smoothly together. Marcus said someone had believed he was worth saving when he couldn't see it himself. Taught him to believe it too. Elena added that Marcus had taught her what worth really meant nothing to do with money or power, everything to do with who you became when you stopped hiding. Sophie observed from her seat that they saved people because that's what they did. They'd saved each other first. Now they saved everybody. Marcus and Elena returned to their seats. Elena's head rested on his shoulder. She asked if he remembered when they first met on a plane like this. Marcus said he remembered. She'd been dying. He'd been invisible. And now they were living. Together. Full circle from one plane to another, from invisible to visible, from surviving to thriving. Marcus closed his eyes and saw 2 versions of himself overlaid like double exposure, the janitor at midnight pushing his cart through empty offices, head down and forgotten, and the nurse in fresh scrubbed stethoscope around his neck, standing tall and visible. Both were him. Both had mattered. Ray Sullivan's voice echoed one final time the words he'd carried for 2 years and would carry for the rest of his life: "You're not done until you decide you're done." Experience doesn't expire. Not at 52. Not at 68. Not ever. Not unless you decide it does.